Jesus, sweet the thought.
It's been quite a challenge for me this week looking at the readings and listening to the gospel conversations, which I thought, again, were excellent. And still at the end of that, trying to find out where is the good news in the gospel passage that's been read today. And there's some good news there, I think. But before we get to the good news, I think there are a number of questions that it does raise and perhaps invites us to engage with. I wonder if you can think back where the joining together of John the Baptist, Elijah, and one of the prophets appears. Few chapters earlier in Mark's gospel, it comes at the time when Herod is trying to make sense of what the disciples and Jesus himself is doing. And Herod says, I think this is John the Baptist, whom I raised from the dead. He's asking, who is doing these things? Some were saying Elijah and the spirit of Elijah, some saying John the Baptist, and some saying one of the prophets. And once again, we have that grouping put together. Who do you say that I am? Jesus asks his disciples. Who do people say that I am? And they say these three holy and distinguished group of people. You know, one thing that I think we do need to note is that all of them were people that lived on the edge and were not exactly well received by top society. And maybe that's a question for us to ask ourselves. Are we seeking acceptance and respect and being looked up to in society? Are we actually seeking that? Or are we prepared to be those that speak truth to power and cause a certain amount of discomfort? It seems that Jesus, I think we'd all say that, was into everyone's life, but he wasn't frightened of speaking truth into the situations as he saw it. These people were disturbing. And I think always the church has to have a flavor or a tincture of disturbance if it's going to make a difference where it is. But what really struck me as being difficult in finding good news is that both those settings or groupings are followed by episodes of death. John the Baptist is executed immediately following those passages, or the account of his execution is recounted to us. And as Jesus asks the disciples, who do people say that I am? Following Peter's remarkable understanding and acceptance, he goes on to say, but the Son of Man must undergo great suffering, be rejected, and be killed. And I don't think they could understand that at the time, and they certainly couldn't understand what it meant to be risen from the dead. But it is one element within all of us is that something has to die as we accept Jesus Christ as Lord. And for me, there are many things in my life I know which I know need to die, and I'm sure that it is with you. And this isn't a time for personal confession, I don't think, though there is a place for that. But for me, one of the things which is important to the church, and one I'm still wrestling with as I go round, is how much am I looking for my church to be successful? And how much am I looking for my church to be true to the teaching of Jesus Christ? When Peter recognized that Jesus was the Messiah, he automatically put his assumptions of what the Messiah would be into that situation. And when Jesus starts saying all the things that really being the Messiah involves, being rejected and being killed, Peter has to take him to one side and say, I don't think you've got that right, Jesus. You must know surely what the Messiah is meant to be doing. And Peter is told quite firmly, get behind me, Satan. You are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things. Get behind me, Satan. How much do we need to review our thinking about Jesus? Because the question from general, who do people say that I am, to much more specific, who do you say that I am, is one that all of us, I think, need to face. Perhaps regularly to ask ourselves, who do we say Jesus is? And then are we prepared for our own inaccurate, incomplete assumptions of who Jesus ought to be challenged and to be informed by who Jesus really is and what he does in our lives? For me, the very big thing was, how big can my church be? How successful can my church be? And as a vicar, I had to recognize quite early on, I was very competitive. And looking around other churches, it was hard to feel rejoicing and glad at the huge signs of growth going on in some areas when my own church was very, very small. Those of you who have been aficionados of the TV program Rev will be able to understand that, how the little vicar in the small London church is somewhat overawed by the charismatic figure in the neighbouring church that gathers hundreds and hundreds of young people about him. But there's also a danger that we see in our own churches. Why can't we be bigger? Why can't we be more successful? So I think one element of good news is that if we were, as I said last week, a diocese of mega churches, very few of us were meeting together. If there were 500 people meeting every Sunday, you could only have 10% of them meeting at a single time. So let's rejoice that, in fact, none of our churches could be considered mega churches just at the moment. Maybe that is some good news. But also, and I think in the gospel conversation, this came up very well as well, is that this doesn't actually depend on us. We have a Messiah that goes to death for us. Yes, we all be called to get rid of things in our own lives. But the good news is we have someone that's gone before us, who promises to be with us when we go through difficult times. And in the end, looks mostly at how we as individuals relate to him and then make a difference in the world. And then the success or otherwise of the groupings that come together is very much secondary. I'm always really encouraged when I read about Peter in the Bible, because he does mirror so much of what I and the church does, leaps in with his understanding and wants everything to go the way he does, whether it's literally into the water out of the boat and has to learn a lesson there, or whether it's making bold assumptions of how he'll never deny Jesus. And yet he does. Maybe some of the words here that we got, those who deny themselves, take up the cross, who's going to be ashamed of Jesus? All these things we can see God resolves and deals with on the cross. And that to me is the good news. Jesus has gone to the cross. It didn't end there. It came with resurrection. And on a Sunday, the day of resurrection, we celebrate and we bring that together. I offer these words in the name of God, who's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
No pen, no tongue can tell what Jesus' love is like.